Well, welcome back to the weird and the wonderful with Strange Bones. That's me. And we are carrying on our journey around the world, looking for interesting information and commonalities that might give us an understanding or even some evidence of the existence of the supernatural and the paranormal. What is there out there? What might we believe? What can we believe? What should we believe? Is there anything at all to believe? And as we progress, uh, we shall be examining, of course, different cultures and different countries. And we've done a whole lot of different countries around the world. We were last live in Chile. So I hope you have a decent cup of something warm on this cold, cold night. And you are ready for another journey into the strange. As always, you are invited to join in. Send as many comments as you would like. But do be respectful. We don't need ourselves on the channel. But definitely stick around, enjoy. And having done a couple in North America and a couple in South America, I think that for our journey tonight, we are going to come back to Africa. And we are going to choose a suitable spot to look at both the ghosts and the cryptids that are to be found in Ghana. I don't know a terribly large amount about Ghana. I know that it is in Africa and it is a fairly large country. I am led to understand that it is a pretty nice country too. So we shall find a little bit about it. It's in West Africa. It has a reasonably sized coastal area, but goes well into inland. It has at least one exceptionally large lake, and I am led to understand that besides a number of good national parks, the capital is Accra. It is adjacent, they say, to the Gulf of Guinea, which sounds promising. And it shares a border with the Ivory Coast in the west, Burkina Faso in the north, and Togo in the east. So it's on that bump of Africa that we call, I think, if I haven't completely forgotten my geography, the Horn of Africa. It has a number of wonderful jungly type places and some pretty impressive towns and cities and buildings. So they say to us that it is a constitutional democracy, whatever the heck that means in this day and age, who's to say? And as far as I can tell, there are 5 official languages, which includes English, Akan, Moshig-Daroma, Yue, and Ga. And that seems pretty much what we need to know to start. So I'm fairly happy with that as an idea of our setting. Now, I really don't know a great deal about the cultures and such, so I think it will be an interesting journey to begin with. So let us start off, as is proper, with a bit of an overview. And it says that Ghana in Ghana, the beliefs in the supernatural is, as we discovered in many African countries that we've touched on thus far, um, it's very much a case of being part of the ordinary and everyday life, along with the idea of other spirits and witchcraft and such. So there is quite a lot that we can say is known, but whether or not people bring it up often is another question, based on the fact that, well, it's just part of life. Now, as we have said, hey Monique, welcome, welcome. As we have said before, it's where you get events of extreme emotive content, such as violence, war, and all the rest of it, that you get a fertile ground for ghosts. And of course, in its history, Ghana has had plenty of wars, and of course, it was very much connected to the transatlantic slave trade. So I think that we will find plenty of possible supernatural things in the historical sites, such as the Cape Coast Castle. Now, why specifically them, I don't know, but it's said that the Akan especially maintain very strong beliefs in ghosts and in their constant interactions with the living. And people often have personal encounters that they will tell of. So that's a good start, if you will. The major place that is said to be very, very haunted is the Cape Coast Castle, which was a slaveholding facility. And they say that due to the immense suffering and loss of life that occurred there, it is very haunted. So that should be quite interesting. In northern Ghana, there are what they call witch camps, where certain people who have been accused of being witches are ostracized and exiled. So there are places that are made up of people that possibly are witches, or just thought to be. They have a number of interesting traditional practices, where if they find somebody who has been murdered, they have an actual corpse carrying ritual where the body is supposed to be able to point out the person responsible, whether it's by direct means or through witchcraft. And of course, along with their strong and current beliefs in the supernatural and paranormal, there is a great deal of need for the proper protections and things, which I think is good. Hi, Nightmare. Welcome, welcome. Now that we've had a fair number of people join us, I'm going to remind you to like, subscribe, send plenty of comments and gifts and things. Hey, the Emperor's Son. Join our fan club and be a part of us so that we can keep this going strongly as much as possible. But if you would like to join on the live, you are welcome to. Just remember to be polite, of course. Hey, Fernanda. And if not, send us tons and tons and tons of comments in the comment section with your opinions. We do not, of course, expect you to in any way agree or believe in one of this stuff. We just would like you to enjoy the journey, and your opinions, whether they agree or disagree, are all welcome. So, to give us a bit of a context, of course, we've spoken of the Cape Coast Castle. Apparently, they have a number of radio programs that often feature discussions about the paranormal, which highlights the prevalence of these beliefs. And there are lots of legends and stories, both old and new, that seem to be incredibly popular. And there are a lot of urban legends apparently. So I'm feeling suitably excited for the journey, such as it is, and we are going to begin on the Gold Coast of Ghana, and they say that while it is a absolutely beautiful place indeed, and it really is. Hey, Pombo de Govano and Alex, who just disappeared. Welcome, welcome. It's good to have you guys here. I'm glad to see that you've joined in, and we are absolutely going to be covering a number of things as much as we can. The more the merrier, I think. So it should be good. So let's see. Interestingly, uh, the first place to touch on is called the Fort of Good Hope, um, which sounds delightful. It's on the coast in a beautiful tropical country. But alas and alack, as all things suitably hopeful in life, this one is awful, because after all, why wouldn't it be? And the Fort of Good Hope was indeed the principal place where slaves were kept and gathered up on their way to be taken off to wherever they were meant to be. And it was just one of the 40 forts and castles built along the Gold Coast for this reason. So some of the forts have been destroyed, others have collapsed, but those that have remained intact have become something of a pilgrimage site for Americans of African descent. Um, and it's largely because they are the few remaining um, physical places that actually show of what was slavery. Now, obviously, those that did what they did when they did and how they did were a number of different um, people over the years. The Portuguese were the first in, then the Dutch were in, the English as well. Um, and of course, besides slaves, it was also called the Gold Coast for a very, very good reason because, well, there was lots of gold. And that, of course, is the key thing that people wanted. Gold is always good. And let's face it, when it comes to primary resources, um, Africa has a lot. But the main point in our interest, of course, is that these particular um, places are said to still hold the ghosts of those that died there. And if you go into them after dark, you can hear whispers and the movement of the chains, which no longer have anyone in them, but the memories remain and are alive until this day, which is quite creepy. The idea of strange ghosts still chained within ancient buildings that remain there in their stress and anger, and who will be there forever, perhaps. There's a question for you that we haven't found an answer as yet, which to me I think is quite important. How long can a ghost remain a ghost? How long will it last? Thank you guys for all those wonderful likes. It's always good to have likes. Definitely helps the channel. But yes, there's a thought. How long do ghosts last? I don't know the answer to that. We do have a number of interesting questions that rise up from these, but these ones, of course, are far younger than you might think. The history there is only about 600 years old, and we certainly know that there are many much, much older ghosts out there. So we can say without a doubt that they have a certain amount of longevity yet in them. But let's talk about the ghosts. And we'll begin by saying that the one thing about Africa, Mother Africa as we like to call her, is that she is a bitch of a parent. And it is not an easy country to be in. It is the kind of place that no matter what, even if you don't believe in God, you will believe in the spirit of Africa. It's an incredibly powerful sort of a place, and beliefs in Africa, I'm going to go as far as to say that they're much deeper than in many other parts of the world. There isn't really a question one way or another of your halfway beliefs. You either do or you don't when it comes to Africa, and by and large, by the end of all things, you certainly do. And there's enough evidence, shall we say, that there's something out there that will quite possibly bite. Now, there are a number of fun urban stories, of course. There is the Kebiwe in Ghana, the man with a head which they call boflot, which I believe is a kind of cake, and he would tap small children on the shoulder while they sleep and invite them to have a bite of his head. That's a suitably creepy story to tell a child. But in Africa we do, don't we? We don't do the soft and the, what do they like to call it nowadays, the woke. You've got to be tough to be in Africa. One of the best kiddie stories told is of the girl that went to a boarding school that always had the most perfect braided hair. And her friends would always ask, how do you manage to get your braids so neat, so perfect? And especially seeing as you're doing it yourself. But she would never answer. And one evening, one of the girls in her dormitory saw her going to the toilet and thought, she's going to braid her hair. I'm going to find out how she does it. And followed her in and peered over the stool. And there was the girl sitting, braiding her hair, but with her head in her lap. So there are plenty of good stories to frighten the children, let's face it. And that's exactly what we're here for, to find the creepy stories. So we have plenty. But that alone is not enough. As we said, there's a number of radio stations that talk about the supernatural and the paranormal that they have in Ghana. And there's an interesting report from a fellow that went to visit, and he was on a bus on a journey to Takoradi, and he was listening to the radio to pass the time, and there was an 8-year-old girl on the show that said that she had been practicing witchcraft since she was 5. And I just thought that it was an interesting story, and of course the person who was visiting was furious about this, and the idea that magic is real is stupid, and illiterate villagers, and all the rest of it. And he was very, very upset that this had happened. But I thought to myself, you know what? This is Africa, and that's how it goes. There's a story as well where a guest pastor in a church convention prophesied about 2 deaths that had occurred earlier on the Tema motorway. And he says there are 2, one holding a rope on this side and one holding a rope on the other, and the car has somersaulted and 2 people died. And he was talking about these 2 church members that had died on the motorway on a business trip as the cars were going through heavy rain. It was only that car carrying those 2 people that flipped and killed the passengers, impacting on the ground. And he says that 2 demons were holding a rope at either end of the street that had caused the death. And the pastor called out a man that was a colleague of the deceased and told him that the devil had an assignment against him as well, and he should be careful. And these are the kind of stories that, from what I understand, are very common. And the reports from foreigners listening to them, the foreigners are very upset and very angry. But I think in many ways in Africa, this is a very real kind of a belief and situation. I mean, I'm not going to say anybody else has to believe, but that is absolutely how things are in the hearts of people in Africa. And it gives you something of, hey, Mokwetsi, welcome, welcome. But it gives you an idea of the kind of land in which we live, by and large, and it's that sort of thing. The next story that we have going through getting the feel of Ghana is that there was in this case specifically, a white girl that had attended the University of Legon, and came back to the campus one day shaken, and she said she was in a taxi on her way back from a day trip, and the driver had a goat that was in the middle of the road, and the goat appeared to be dead or dying. And this is also very typical. They got out of the taxi, had a look, and then put the goat in the trunk. And by the time they got back to Accra, they opened the trunk, and the goat was gone. And there was no way for the goat to have got out of it. And of course, the point here being that it was a white girl that had seen it, so it wasn't just as the storyteller wanted to believe that it was some villager or something that was easily swayed to a belief, but this was an outside type person. But nevertheless, these are the kind of stories that all people tell you are every day. They happen all the time. Thanks for the heart there from the Emperor's Son. You're a scholar and a gentleman, sir, and I thank you for that. So this is the world in which we are living in Africa. It is the kind of thing that, by and large, we can expect. And what I find very, very interesting is that these are considered to be ordinary. Now, for some reason, they particularly say the people that believe the most are the Akan. Now, I'm not sure why that might be, as there are several different peoples that live in Ghana, but perhaps somebody can explain it to us one day. I don't know, but nevertheless. But there are a number of interesting places, regardless of how you might think it. And we're going to start off with the Accra Witch Market. Now, what is very interesting, and this again is something typical to Africa. I mean, we get it in South Africa very much as well. But the witch market, literally the place where you can go and buy all of those things to deal with the supernatural and paranormal, from herbs to healings to curses if you find the right shop, and all the rest of it. And the Accra Witch Market, which by and large is alien to somebody from outside, I think for us is a very ordinary kind of thing. And they do say that visitors report feeling watched and followed by invisible presence, and that there is a sense of the uncanny and magic in the air. No, absolutely, and why shouldn't there be? We are after all talking about a witch market, which is quite normal in Africa. We have plenty such places, and everybody knows you're always polite to the vendors, just in case, because you never know. I would barely consider that a haunted place at all. Um, it's simply a spot, if a little special. But besides that, the main haunting places besides the castles, we have the Jamestown Lighthouse. Now, I like lighthouses. They have always seemed to end up haunted in one way or another, which is rather great. And it's partly because of the difficult history of lighthouses. But this particular one, you can hear people walking around in even when nobody is there. And it is said that there are living shadows that move in the corners when you are walking around inside of it. And of course, we know all about the living shadows, do we not? We have encountered them on many occasions. So there is no doubt that we are familiar with that. Then we have the Osu Castle, which has hidden secret tunnels, which are filled with cold spots and gusts of wind that cannot have gotten down into the tunnels. And they say that there are many spirits that live within the walls of these tunnels, some of which are ghosts of the guards that still patrol the castle. So I must say that the castle itself is quite a pretty castle as castles go, but It seems that every castle we have ever encountered has at least one ghost. It's part of the building. And then, of course, you have the ghosts of Fort Amsterdam, which is a crumbling castle that is said to be the site of many ghostly encounters where, and this is one ghost for those of you who have asked in the past, are there any ghosts that scare me? This is one that does. The laughter of children can be heard echoing down the hallways. I'm not fond of child ghosts, not in any manner or form. So a castle filled with ghosts is fine, but when there's child ghosts that play in the corridors, I'm not going to lie to you. Right there, I get a little dodgy about how that goes. Then, of course, again, fitting very much with our view on how ghosts appear and what have you, we have the abandoned hospital in Kumasi. And that's without a doubt, if you want ghosts, go to a hospital. Whether they're abandoned or in use, you will get ghosts. And this particular one is said to be the stuff of nightmares, even for the most seasoned horror lover. The paranormal activity includes apparitions in hospital gowns, unexplained cold spots, and the sounds of people moving around the building. So I like the idea of that. They still keep it in pretty good nick, I must say. Now here's an interesting one. The next haunted location is in fact a mosque. Now I say that this is an interesting one because by and large I've always been led to believe that places that are holy shouldn't ever be haunted in any manner or form, unless something has happened and it is abandoned and no longer in use, etc., etc. But even so, holy ground should be a refuge from ghosts and such. So I find it very interesting when you encounter one, and we have encountered a few on our journey around the world that have been haunted. And here we have another one, and this is Larabanga Mosque, which is, I'm going to try and put it up behind me because it's actually a very, very interesting mosque. It's very pretty, and this is a kind of building which I'm led to understand is quite typical in Ghana. It's very unique, which I think is rather wonderful. But can I get it up? Is it going to be... It does not want me to use that picture. Why are you being a pain? We'll cheat. We can always cheat. There are lots of ways to cheat. Why do we cheat? Because we can cheat. But I really would like to. This is not my picture, of course. I'm stealing it without a shadow of a doubt. Purely because I particularly would like you to see what I think is a very interesting and beautiful building. And there we go. There's a way to do it all. So there you have it. There is the mosque, which I do think is particularly pretty. I like that a lot. I like that very much indeed. But they say that it is nevertheless... I don't know if haunted is the right word in this case, because in this particular instance, it is not a scary or bad spirit, whether it's a ghost or spirit or whatever that is there, but a presence that brings those that visit a distinct sense of happiness, calm, and peace. And it is believed that this spirit protects the sacred site. So maybe that's how you can get ghosts and things on holy ground if they're good ones, because most, unless it's been a decommissioned church of some kind, most of the ones that have been good ghosts. Can we say this? So maybe that's okay then on holy ground. But they say that things do occasionally get moved and tidied, and everybody always feels so much better being inside. Even if you do hear sounds around that are not normal. So a positive haunting, and why not? The next interesting thing is known as the Watcher of the Lake, and this is Lake Busumtwi, and apparently, if you go there, you will see a figure, humanoid, standing at something of a distance that watches you. But if you approach this person, they disappear and they cannot be found. But it seems that there is some kind of a guardian, perhaps, that will stand watching, and nobody seems to know who or what it might be, whether it is a ghost or a spirit or some kind of a person that's hiding there, but they've apparently been there for a very long time, which I think is an interesting thing. The next haunted place is a abandoned gold mine in Suta, and if you go down into the mine, visitors hear voices urging them to go deeper and deeper, which may be a trap. It is not certain how safe these mines are, of course, anymore, and it's possible that the spirits are drawing you down to your doom, or perhaps they want to make contact. It's hard to say, but if you're in a darkened tunnel underground and there are voices calling you on, I dare say that it wouldn't be my advice that you should listen to them. Let's just say that. Now, the next interesting one, which I think is somewhat important, is kind of iffy as to what it is, and I say that because, as we know, we have encountered on more than one occasion what we are now referring to as the jinn, which are a race of people apparently that live partly in this world and partly alongside this world in a world of their own. They are very much a people, according to what we are led to understand. Possibly with certain supernatural abilities, we're not sure, but they can slip between the worlds and therefore appear and disappear. They can fully come into this world and have a physical body and be just like us, or they can just appear to be in this world and be almost created of shadow, as they can't then be touched. Maybe it's a safe way of seeing what's going on without actually being here. And the reason I raise them up is because of Akosombo Dam, where shadowy figures are often seen. Now, some believe these are the spirits of workers who died during its construction, forever tied to this incredible dam that they helped erect. But it's also possible because, of course, you're talking about this huge dam in a fairly wild area. At least parts of the shores of the dam are fairly wild, and we know that the shadow folk like places that are much more, shall we say, desolate than others. So there's a reasonable possibility that what we're actually talking about is not a ghost at all, but one of the jinn. And of course, they turn up a lot all over Africa, as well as many other countries around the world. So it's a promising thing. Now, progressing on, we are going to bring a couple more ghosts. So this interesting one, which comes out of Ghana, is a story from someone that said they moved into a new place, a new house, and they said the moment that they got into the house, they decided that the house seems to be haunted. They said it's a very big house with about 8 bedrooms located, not terribly remote, but remote enough. The nearest neighbours being just under a mile away. And they say that they hear footsteps at night, heavy boots around midnight. It also doesn't seem to approach. Okay, if you hear somebody walking towards you, you would hear it softer, getting louder as they get up to you and then fading as they pass. Whereas in this case, they say that it's just they're walking right near them loud and then not there at all, which is interesting. And at first they say they was too scared to go and look. But then it became so common that they now do look out, but there's never anyone there. They say they have 2 windows on their room. They're obviously on a corner because one is out on the one wall and the other is on the side facing the other way. They say then that with these windows, the way they are facing, the way you can see the steps up to the house very easily from 2 separate views, if you will. So plenty of scope of vision, but while you can hear the footsteps coming up these steps just outside, there is nevertheless nothing to be seen, only the sound of the stepping. And they point out that they would absolutely be able to see if anybody was there making the noise. The second thing that they point out is they are absolutely sure that there is something in their room. It's not harmful, but it seems to be a naughty child or a naughty spirit. They often have their door open on its own with no reason to. They feel someone lying next to them in the bed with them, and things are often moved around or hidden. Sometimes they find their cell phone in the bottom of their closet, their shoes nowhere to be found, their headset got missing for weeks, music goes up and down in volume, no matter what. So they can turn the button right off on the volume for their music and it will still be playing. So there seems to be something absolutely in the room with them, but they say, well, what can I do? I've got to sleep there. So they say I was in the living room watching TV and very slowly their room door opened. The living room can be seen from the room. So the door opened like somebody was peeking through to see what they were doing. So the person shouted, "What the hell are you looking at? Close the door." and to their amazement, the door slowly closed. And when they went to check, the latch was intact and everything, which means that the only way for the door to swing open and close, you have to turn the handle, or it wouldn't come loose, if you know what I'm saying. So there's no way that it could have opened without somebody actually opening it. And yet, of course, as they say, there was nobody actually there, which is very interesting. There was a time when they decided, in order to try and understand what was going on, they thought maybe it would be a good idea to learn to meditate, opening up of chakras and things. You know how it all goes. And when they did, they went into something of a seizure. The sound systems turned on, and then off again. Their lights started flickering, and it wasn't a power problem because it was only happening in their bedroom, and the TV was working quite perfectly down the hall in the living room. They could hear it. And then since then, they say they get senses of things that are going to happen just before they do, almost as if something is whispering the answers inside their head. So who's to say? Maybe there is more to this. So I don't know. But let's look at the next ghost. And this happened around 2013, when the person who told us the story was in high school. They were in boarding because the parents felt that they were a touch naughty and could do with the discipline. So there they were in boarding school, and it seemed their parents were quite right, because they used to sneak out to town, and this was a mistake on the parents' side, because they sent him to boarding school in the town that they lived in, and their best friend lived in town. So they would do these escapes to go and watch shows, go to the movies, hang out together, play video games, because why not? Now, his friend and family lived in a secluded house surrounded by acres of intentionally planted pine trees and such. And they were obviously fairly well off, because they had their own soccer field and such, which obviously was a great attraction for young lads that wanted to play. And the one day he went out visiting, and he was sneaking back home at the end of the day, and as he did so, he ran into his father, who was supposed to be on business in Germany, and he had no idea that his dad was coming home. So he got a suitable redressing and hiding, and was sent screaming back to school. And shortly after that, he then got a girlfriend who was also at that school, and because of the combination of these things, he never left the school for quite some time, as he normally did. Kids, these things happen. What do you expect? But the point that's being made is, then he decided again that it was time he had better go and visit his friend, and decided that it'd probably be a good idea if he spent the night there on this trip, catch up with his buddy and all the rest. And his friend had an uncle staying with them that they just call uncle. Why not? But apparently he was a fun uncle, and he always covered for them when they planned on doing something a little naughty. So he gets to the house, and it was getting a bit dark, and he knocked, didn't get a response, knocked, so there were no lights inside, so he thought, well, obviously not home. So he's about to leave when the door opens, and he saw the uncle come out, so he greeted him and asked him where his nephew was, and he says, no, he's not around. So he said, well, thank you, and he left. Then 2 days later, he went back there, and his friend was there, but his uncle wasn't. So they chatted for a while, and he says, yeah, well, I asked him where you were 2 days ago. He says, well, he was out of town. So I went ahead and said, yeah, oh, because I came around to see you, and only your uncle was there. And his uncle had said that you weren't around. But his friend looks at him and says, but my uncle's been dead for 2 months. So he thinks, come on, no, he's playing with me. So he asked his friend's mother and got the same answer. So basically what happened was he had come around while obviously his friend had been away at the funeral of the uncle, and all the things that went along with that. But the ghost was actually at the house. So, right there, that was an interesting story. But then in 2015, his friend died after serious surgery, and he went and he was at the hospital for about a week, and was with him at home for 2 days before leaving for college. Look, while the guy was supposed to be recovering from the serious surgery, and then basically said, listen, I've got to leave now for college, so I might not see you for about 4 months. And his friend was very sad and crying that he was going. So what can you do? He had to go to college, so he went to college. And he was there off wherever it was. And while he was there, he got the news in school that he died in his sleep the day that he left. And it was very sad. And he says that after all the interesting stories and the things that happened, perhaps one day he will get to see this guy again that was just like his brother, seeing as he already did get to see the uncle after his death. But he says it hasn't happened yet. But it's a very sad story and sort of sweet as well, but definitely suitably creepy. Hey, KLX, the idea of running into a dead person and not knowing it and having a good old chat with them is an interesting one, and I rather like it. The last of the good haunting stories that we've got from Ghana is again about a guy who was in boarding school. Maybe boarding schools are not good places to go to in Ghana. I'm just throwing it out there. But and the school in question in this case was located out in the countryside, and it's probably deliberate. It's always a good thing, to be a bit further away so the kids can't sneak out. But the boys' dormitory is surrounded by miles and miles and miles of forest, and the kids all knew, well, this is typical for any kids in dormitories. They all knew that the school was haunted, and let's face it, if there is any chance the school is haunted, it will be told to every other kid in the school the moment they arrive. It's practically one of the first things ever, so you can expect that. And it was also said that you should never go into the woods because there are things. And of course, some do. And apparently, all that do regret their decision. So this is the story of one of these people that apparently regretted his decision. Um, so for the sake of the story, they call this guy Max, and Max is one of these athletic types, you know, big, tall, strong, muscular types, and he always says that there's nothing in the woods and he can um, spend as much time as he wants. He'd spend a night there. He doesn't care. And of course, soon, eventually, because this is a boy thing, he is bet that he won't. So eventually, at around 11 at night, he sets out to spend the night there alone. And so, of course, everybody's sitting around laughing and, will he make it? What's going on? And about an hour later, around midnight, they hear this horrible scream. So everyone was too scared to go and see, so they contact campus security, and about 8 of these security guards go searching for this kid. And then they do find him. But when they find him, he was unconscious, and he's brought back. But to the date of the story told, about 4 or 5 years later, Max has lost his ability to speak at all, and whatever happened in the woods was so terrifying that it actually broke his mind. So, along with that story, a friend of his woke up and started calling for them to come and see something. Now they're all in bunk beds, and he was by. Now, again, pay attention. Pay attention. He was right by a big glass window, so he could lie in bed and see outside. So we went to his bed, and there was a giant ball of fire that was bouncing among 3 trees. These trees are not small, they're tall, and they were not close, quite far apart, maybe 100 meters between the trees, and this flame fire thing is bouncing from one to the other. And they all sat there watching it and discussing it, so they were awake. But they could not explain it. And then they say that after a certain amount of time, it just disappears. They saw it again on several occasions, but they again cannot explain what it was. Now, the reason I said pay attention is because, again, if it was a ghost or a ghost-formed thing, like an orb, apparently it cannot come through glass, and I was hoping that they would tell us something about that, but alas, it didn't try to come through the glass. But thank you for the likes. We love the likes. Please give a comment. Tell us what you think. But yes, orbs and similar are definitely meant to be around haunted places, so we still are not sure why. But there you have it. There is absolutely interesting things so in Ghana. But what else do we have? As we know, in Africa, it's very hard to separate ghosts and witchcraft and cryptids. And as we found in Côte d'Ivoire when we did Côte d'Ivoire, the first of the cryptids that are said to be out there is also found in Ghana, the Asanbosan, which is a large, hairy, dangerous creature that is humanoid with iron teeth and claws, and is the vampire version that you get in Ghana. So again, we have found vampires, something that specifically is interested in drinking blood, yours, just in case you're wondering. And the Asan-Bosan in Ghana is explained exactly the same way as it was explained in Côte d'Ivoire. It is basically the same thing. It has either got horns or very pointy ears, that's not clear, but it is a bearded human with an over-skinny body and protruding ribs. It may have membranous wings like bat wings and twisted legs. It's apparently around 5 foot to 6 foot tall, which could stretch to about 20 foot. Yes, about 20 feet, I think, by the description, which is quite wide for wings. It has a ridged crest, like a fowl, and short, hard, stiff hair on the head, but scaly ridges and black and white skin. It says that it sleeps in tree hollows and makes a cry a bit like that of a bat, but deeper. And its main aim in life is to drink blood. It is, however, said that the last time it was seen was in 1928 when it was photographed. But, well, that's all we know about the Asan-Bosan. Then, of course, you have another vampire. So you want to be careful of vampires in Ghana, it seems. Maybe take some suitable amount of garlic with you when you go. I don't know if it works on African vampires. Hey, Yil. Welcome, welcome. That's a good question. And it's one that came up in a past live that we had, as to what makes a holy object work on something dark and evil, because everybody said, and this is logic now, everybody says that the religion they believe in is the right religion, which of course you should. You should not be believing in a religion if you don't think it's the right religion. But if for the sake of argument Hinduism is correct, that would mean the other religions possibly are not. So does that mean that their holy items won't work? Is there a certain basis of truth in all religions? So to a certain degree, all holy items work. I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. It's a very interesting comment. But nevertheless, the Adze is the second vampiric creature from the Iwe folklore, which is particularly prominent in Ghana. And this is an interesting one because they say it can transform into a firefly, but then take human form, and it can possess individuals, forcing them to become witches. And it has serious impact on their families, of course, and on their communities. And one explanation for the Adze is that it might be a way to explain malaria away. But then again, perhaps not. How true is such a thing? Well, I suppose the only answer to that is going to be whether or not you can find one and find out. I dare you. Nevertheless, um, when it is in human form, it is exactly as you would expect. Um, all people possessed by the Adze are considered to be witches, um, and the influence of this creature, which is apparently evil, um, would be, of course, a very, very negative sort of a thing. Um, and you can tell if somebody is possessed, and now this is very dodge. I'm not sure how true any of it is, but this is now entirely what I am told. Okay, so if someone else in the family, like the brother or sister's children, fares well much better than every other person in the family's children, which I think is a bit of a difficult one. If you are old, but the young people in the family start dying, but not you, um, if you're poor, well, as you can imagine, then you are said to be possessed. Um, Now, in firefly form, because it's small, the Adze can travel through keyholes and cracks in walls under closed doors at night, and once in the home, it will suck the blood from people as they sleep, making them fall ill and die. Um, there is no defense against an Adze. Great! That sounds like a wonderful bit of news to hear. The next interesting creature is the Mokelemembe, which is a cryptid which we have seen in a number of places around Central Africa, absolutely. And it's a large semi-aquatic animal, um, potentially a surviving sauropod. Um, Basically, it's the African version of the Loch Ness Monster. So we have them all around the world. People often see them, and there's a very good chance that these stories come from old tales of prehistoric creatures that definitely did exist but no longer do. And maybe one or two have survived. But certainly tales of the Mokele Mbembe are found all over Africa, and they are literally the same as the ones you find all over America, uh, Europe, and the rest. So no surprises there at all. Um, are there more? Um, by and large, there's a lot of um, generalized sort of creatures and what have you, but I think we've covered the main particular types, and it's very difficult to get specific stories out of Ghana, not because they don't exist, but rather because there are just so many that they're considered to be just ordinary. They are part of um, what you would expect all the time. So there's no particular um, surprising nature to it. So they are far less recorded as they would be in other countries that don't believe in such things, um, which does make it a bit difficult um, to find exactly uh, what sort of things are seen, but there are a few that are tied in with the cultures and mythologies and what have you. But as we progress, let's see what else we can discover in that regard. The next interesting cryptid from Ghana is the Tano giant, which basically is Bigfoot. That's what it is. It's a half ape-like, half human, very hairy wildman. And it just goes to show that we have Bigfoot in so many different countries that it seems there must be something more to the story. Hey, Emmy, if only because you need to have reasons for it turning up in so many different places. I don't know. I think that it is reasonable to me to consider it that there may very well be something like this, at least somewhere around. I tend to find that where a cryptid or myth is specific to one place only, it's far more unlikely to be anything more than an explanation, if you know what I'm saying. But when it's so many people in so many different cultures, you can't help starting to wonder a little bit that it might be something more to the stories. And with the Bigfoot stories, such as the Tano giant, absolutely, there is no doubt. Now, as we said, there's quite a diverse heritage of ethnicity in Ghana. You've got the Akan, the Ewe, and the Ga, and of course each has their own special things, which makes it possibly a little difficult to tell exactly who believes what where, unless you go there yourself and do some serious cultural in-depth studies or something. But by and large, even treating them all as one people, such as it is, in general, they all believe in the Abosom, which are the spirits. There is absolutely ancestor worship there, which again tends to make it difficult to find ghost stories because people don't see them as ghost stories so much as it's just family. You know, why would we talk about it to outsiders? Which is fair. But they also consider that many places to be inhabited by varying spirits. So you have, of course, the supreme deity or Nyami, which is sort of the sky god in a way. And then the counterpart, which is Asaseya, the earth goddess, consort to Nyame, to do with fertility and all of that. But interestingly, for somebody connected to fertility, she was also the caretaker of the dead. And I think this is very, very important as it shows the mindset of Ghanaians about how they view the dead. The dead are not something bad or scary. They are part of life. And that is important. Of course, you can't talk about Ghana without talking about our favorite fellow Anansi, who has all sorts of stories. So there are plenty of gods and such out there to back up the mystical. along with all the cryptids and strange things. Um, and of course, many of the old stories explain how the cultural beliefs work. So if you read the stories of Anansi, it explains worldviews in a great many ways. Um, but quite noticeably, um, by and large, there is seen a big difference between the cryptids and dark spirits, um, and anything more godlike. So there are clear distinctions made within the culture as to what it's not just about beliefs in this or that. Um, there is a difference. So you can absolutely no longer believe in the old gods and be Christian, say, and still know that the Asambo-san are out there. Um, so you get a very unique sort of a blend that I think is um, something along the lines of a reality in Africa that I think people from outside of Africa um, just don't understand well, in a way, um, which I think is a wonderful thing in many ways. Really, I like that sort of part of life in Africa. I think the spiritual is important. Now, there's an interesting tale that is told by a visitor to Ghana, where they decided that they were going to try and find some of these um, mythical monsters to see if they were in any way down. And he was going out into the rural areas uh, and was looking forward um, to seeing how the local life was lived um, as a real adventure. And of course, this silly bugger had come out from New York and was really not ready for uh, Africa as such, from the capital at Sunyani down to these tiny little village municipalities like Penkwasi and all the rest of it. And the the absolute difference was quite the culture shock in the story. Um, but I will give them the credit of keeping at it. They at least had balls, and they were told of a predator that was, for the last few months, uh, killing animals around the area of Brongafado Ahafo. Um, and apparently there was all sorts of eviscerated livestock, and right along with it, the press had gotten involved with dramatic headlines and more, which is quite amusing and typical. Now, the the guy got a driver to drive him out uh, and take him out to Suyani and back. Um, it's about 80 miles each way. And on their trip, he asked this guy, are you worried about this beast that might be out there? Um, but he seemed not to care. um, which possibly was strange. And as they were driving, because I mean, 80 miles is quite a distance, he thought that, we'd get into conversation. Um, but it seems that no matter how he tried, um, it just didn't uh, happen. He wanted to try and, point out that he knew that there's a tradition in Ghana that people are often given names depending on what day that they are born, and this guy's name was Kwesi, so he was obviously born on a Sunday. But nevertheless, he just kept silent and occasionally giving him uncomprehending looks. Um, so this guy's like, well, clearly this ain't working. So they sit in silence for, 80 miles, what, about 120 Ks? Um, and they arrive there at the Ashanti capital. And there was obviously a feast going on at the time for it was the jubilee of the Asantehene, the Ashanti king, Otumfo Opoku Ware II. So big parties going on, all kinds of banners up and all the rest of it, lots of good things happening, which seemed to belie at least the worry about whatever this beast might be that was killing animals around the area, and got himself a ride out of the town and onwards to their destination, more rural as they go, um, and it got nicer and nicer, but as they got further, even though there were houses alongside the road, they became a bit poorer. Um, they realized that it was getting bloody dark. It's not like New York when uh, where you go out into the wilder areas, um, there are no proper doors, there are no street lamps. It's very dark at night. Um, so they're starting to realize they're getting into some dodgy area for them, but they went on regardless. Um, and they went down to try to find um, more of the strange beast, if you will. Uh, but they described having go out, and they did find what were a couple of cows that had been killed by whatever the beast was, um, and that it was clearly taken down with something with claws. Could it have been a lion or something? Well, the locals said it was not. That it was something uh, larger and scarier. Um, but nevertheless, when they got there, the local police said that, don't worry, if there's something out there, we'll find it and kill it. It's not a problem. But nevertheless, while they had found evidence of a something, um, it was now causing far more trouble in that it was causing arguments among the actual populace, where different churches were saying that they would be able to exorcise this beast, and fighting among themselves, and it was now becoming more of a problem. And then people started accusing other churches that no, the beast isn't a beast, it's demons sent by that church because they're bad and all the rest of it. And clearly something needed to be done, but whatever it was, nobody had managed to stop the beast, and all they had managed to do was get up a curfew that everyone needs to be off the streets before a certain time, and that really didn't help much at all. So you've got this New Yorker who's now in the middle of Ghana somewhere, and is way out of uh, their depth in this. Um, and now he's with a dodgy taxi driver who simply does not want to uh, even speak to him. So it was making them feel very isolated, shall we say, which is very, very, very interesting. But they went on um, into the town to see if they can find more things about it. But again, not much. The churches were fighting amongst each other. Um, Everybody is annoyed, scared, upset, angry, losing out on their varying uh, stuff. But they finally find somebody um, that says that they do know something about the beast. He is black and white, and he drinks blood from the neck. So this absolutely sounds like an Asan. So maybe. So now the kids are all afraid where they're staying, and everybody is convinced that this is an issue. Um, and then, of course, uh, the beast killed again. So the traditional council gathered to talk about this and say, what are we going to do? I must say the story is very, very long, but ultimately, the net result of it all was that it was a dog man. Now, I don't know how big the idea of dogmen are in Ghanaian lore or mythology, but from the story itself, it seems to have turned out that people didn't normally believe in such things. It was an unusual kind of thing in that regard. So perhaps we have to say that this story, at least, seems to imply that there are some things. The descriptions agreed, of those that at least said they saw it, that it was some kind of dog-like creature, but part man. Can we then say that it was a holidaying werewolf? I don't know. But the last cryptid that I want to mention, of course, which I think is very interesting, um, is one which it comes from the Ashanti primarily, and it's an interesting story that I find fascinating. And it goes like this. So back in the day, there were many things that God had made. But when God made the world, he put it together in a certain way and decided that all that he would put into the world would only be things that fit the world. And there were certain things that he left out that did not fit the world. Now, the world is what is, and it is good. And all those things that matter are in the world. But the beings that are not in the world, that were left out by God, are angry about this. They don't like the fact that they were left out of the world, and they are constantly trying to get back into the world, to have life, which they don't. And these things are described as shadow people, with burning red eyes, a people that have a hatred for that which is alive and real, because their existence is unreal. And every now and then they can come through from the out of, the other side, the not what is, and get into this world. And many times when bad things happen, it is because of these creatures, which I believe are called the Shanti, which will then move around and cause havoc. Now, what's very interesting is I have encountered the exact description of these things in many countries around the world, and on 3 fairly notable occasions have seen something like it myself out in the wild and desolate places. And I've known a number of people who I'm going to say that by and large they are the least superstitious people I know. They don't believe in anything much, but they saw things and described them. And I will tell you one such tale by a guy who is an absolute hardcore atheist and doesn't believe in any of that crap because it's all stupid and I'm not a child. Yet the story he told me showed that, let's just say that his beliefs had been modified somewhat. But these Shanti are almost exactly the same in their description to the jinn as we talk about them. And this is now our third category. We have cryptids, physical creatures that may or may not exist. We have ghosts, spirits of those who have died and come back for whatever reason. And you have jinn. Now, of course, there'll be a fourth category as we go along, but we have got nowhere near that yet. But so the jinn are absolutely a something, and they are a story that comes up in Ghana. And this next story that I will tell you happened to a good friend of mine, who, as I say, is a very straightforward Westerner who does not believe in anything, but has worked all over Africa. And he was staying in a flat, and it was one of those sort of nice, tight little townhouse type flats where you've got limited space, so you've got 2 stories and not much garden, and just outside of the house you have a garage. And he often went around by motorbike because it was convenient, and they had a car, but it was his wife's. And excuse me, his wife had a little dog that he wasn't terribly fond of. It was a poodle. But she loved it, and so they had it. Is often the case. And the one day he was home, she was away for a couple of days, work or something. And he came home, parked the bike, was shutting the garage doors and about to go into the house when he realised the bloody dog's still in the garage. So he calls the dog and 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 the dog just does not listen. And you know what? Sod you. And he shuts the garage door. And he says, I'll give it an hour. And when it gets bloody hungry, because it's evening, it's going to want its nice food, the little sod will come out then, won't he? So he went in and he was making himself dinner and the dog walked in. He thought, that's interesting, because it's one of those garages that there are no windows. It's a small garage for a flat, so it's got a door and 3 walls. So how the hell did the dog get out? And then he thinks to himself, oh Lord, some other animals got into the garage. So all right, so he feeds the dog. He was very happy. And then he goes and he gets his 9mm just in case. And he goes and he opens the garage and he looks in and this thing is at the back of the garage. So he shouts at it, like, hey, get out, in the hope it'll run out and then it won't be his problem. And this thing growls and it's crouched at the end of the garage and he's like, hang on a minute, what the hell is this? So he cocks the old 9mm and he starts going down to see what the hell this thing is. And then this deep, growly voice says to him, go away. Well, he said that was enough for him. He backed up fast, he shut the garage door, he went back into the house and he locked himself in. He kept his 9mm on his hip all night. He says he has no idea what the fuck it was. It was too small to be a human. Not with a voice as deep as that. It was growly and crouched in the corner, and it had red eyes that burned. And when he had got in far enough, he realized that it wasn't hiding in the shadows, it was a shadow. And that was from somebody that doesn't believe in the supernatural. And he asked me what I thought it was. And I remember at the time I recounted to him the tale of the Chianti. And he says, does anything work? And I said, well, to the best of my knowledge, brother, you pray. And he says, don't worry. I bought myself a crucifix. So, you may believe what you will, but he certainly woke up. And those are the Chianti, creatures found in Ghana that lurk among the darkness and which may or may not be a truly terrifying creature. Now, if anybody has any particular want for a specific country covered, let me know. But remember, like, subscribe, join the channel, become a member of the fan club, send lots of gifts because we love them, and lots of likes because we love them. But for tonight, we are done with our exploration. We have gone far enough into Ghana. We'll have to pick another country to look at, which will be Monday, because Sundays we do nothing. But until then, I bid you a good night. Sleep sweet. But remember, sleep with one eye open, just in case. Keep a holy object near at hand, because you never know. Those things that go bump in the night might bump for you.